Hands! Give me your hands now! Right here. Give me your hands, motherfucker!
Show me your hands!
Show me your hands!
Put your hands behind your back!
Show me your hands! Right here. I will kill you!
Put your hands behind your back now!
Give me your hands!
Calvary didn't do that. I think they're on foot somewhere.
It's July 28th, 2023. It's a Thursday morning in Kentucky, just after 10 o'clock. And somewhere on the roads, cutting through the bluegrass state, a man named Robert Kidd is behind the wheel of a stolen car, and he is running. Kentucky State Police have been alerted. The suspect is reported to be armed, he is reported to be dangerous, and he is not stopping. What follows is not a short pursuit. This chase stretches across 4 Kentucky counties. It spans 2 separate KSP post areas. Multiple law enforcement agencies get involved, coordinating across radio channels, trying to bring a dangerous situation to a close. This is a significant, large-scale pursuit moving through Kentucky roads on a Thursday morning. Dispatch is active, troopers are communicating. Everyone is focused on one thing, stopping Robert Kidd. Among the troopers who responds to that dispatch call is a man named Hayden Kilborn. Kilborn is a Kentucky State Trooper. He has a badge, a uniform, a weapon, and a responsibility. When the call goes out, he answers it. He joins the pursuit. At this point, there is nothing unusual about any of that. This is what troopers do. This is the job. But what Kilborn does next will cost him everything. If this is your first time here, welcome. This channel exists to make sure stories like this one don't get buried. Subscribe, turn on your notifications, and let's get into it. Eventually, after miles of pursuit across 4 counties, troopers managed to deploy a tire deflation device. It works exactly as it's supposed to. The tire goes flat, the stolen vehicle slows, and in Carroll County, Kentucky, the car comes to a stop. The chase is over, or at least it should be. Robert Kidd throws open the door of that vehicle and runs. On foot, into the woods. The foot pursuit is on. Hayden Kilborn is among the troopers giving chase. He is gaining on Robert Kidd, and then he deploys his taser. Kidd goes down. The foot pursuit is over. At this moment, the situation is under control. The suspect is on the ground. He is not running. He is not fighting. The chase, the long, multi-county, multi-agency chase, is finished. Robert Kidd is on the ground in the woods in Carroll County, and he is not going anywhere. This is the moment where training is supposed to take over, where everything a law enforcement officer has been taught about use of force, about de-escalation, about the difference between apprehension and punishment, this is where all of that is supposed to kick in. Robert Kidd raises his hands, he is complying, and Trooper Hayden Kilborn reaches for his baton. What you are watching right now is body camera footage that KSP chose to release publicly because even the agency itself knew that what was on this tape needed to be seen. Kilborn strikes Robert Kidd with the baton. Not once, not twice, multiple times. Blow after blow landing on Kidd's arms and upper body as Kidd lies there on the ground, showing his hands, doing the one thing you are always told to do when law enforcement has you at their mercy, comply. Submit. Show them you are not a threat. It made no difference. KSP's own public statement described what this camera captured in plain, unambiguous language. During the baton strikes, the suspect was seen on body camera footage appearing to comply and show his hands to Trooper Kilborn. That is not the language of a civil rights organization. That is not the language of a protest sign. That is the Kentucky State Police describing what their own officer did, in their own words, in an official public statement. The man was complying, and he was beaten anyway. When it was over, Robert Kidd was left with 7 stitches to his upper lip. His teeth were broken. His face and body were covered in bruising. 7 stitches. Broken teeth from a man who had already been tased, who was already on the ground, who was already showing his hands. Word of what happened gets back to KSP Command quickly. An administrative review of the incident is launched almost immediately, and what that review finds is not ambiguous. There is no prolonged internal debate about whether what Kilborn did was justified. The agency looks at the footage and they reach a conclusion fast. 5 days after the beating, 5 days, not 5 months, not 5 years. Commissioner Philip Burnett Jr. issues an intent to dismiss Hayden Kilborn. Not a written warning, not additional training, not a temporary reassignment, an intent to fire him permanently from the Kentucky State Police. That is a significant and rare thing. Police departments across this country have a long and well-documented history of protecting officers who use excessive force, of closing ranks. of finding justifications for behavior that cameras show clearly was unjustifiable. The fact that KSP's commissioner moved to fire Kilbourne within 5 days of the incident speaks to just how indefensible this footage was. There was simply no version of events where what Kilbourne did could be explained away, but Kilbourne was not going without a fight. Under Kentucky law specifically, KRS Chapter 16, Kilbourne had the right to challenge his dismissal, and he exercised that right. He requested a hearing before the KSP trial board. He made his case. The board heard the evidence, and they blinked. Instead of upholding the termination, the KSP trial board reduced Kilbourne's punishment to a 6-month suspension without pay. 6 months for beating a compliant black man on the ground with a baton, for the broken teeth, for the 7 stitches, for the bruising that covered Robert Kidd's body, for the violation of every standard and principle that law enforcement claims to stand for. 6 months without a paycheck. That suspension ended on February 15th, 2024. Now, to be fair, and this story deserves fairness, even in the places where the system fell short, KSP did not simply dust off Kilbourne's badge and send him back out onto Kentucky roads after those 6 months. Because by the time that suspension ended, something else was already in motion. Something that would ultimately prove far more consequential than any internal disciplinary process: a criminal investigation. KSP had launched a criminal investigation into the incident on August 4th, 2023, just 1 week after the beating. And while that investigation moved forward, Kilbourne was placed on administrative assignment in the Office of Technical Services. His sworn law enforcement duties were suspended. He had no police powers. He was not on the road. He was not making arrests. He was not in a position to do to anyone else what he had done to Robert Kidd. The investigation moved methodically. These things take time. Evidence has to be gathered carefully, thoroughly, in a way that will hold up in court. And so the weeks turned into months. Summer became fall. And on September 18th, 2023, nearly 2 months after the beating, KSP submitted the case to the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor reviewed the evidence, reviewed the body camera footage, reviewed the injuries sustained by Robert Kidd, and filed charges. 2 charges against Hayden Kilbourne: assault in the 2nd degree, and terroristic threatening in the 3rd degree. 1 day later, September 19th, 2023, Kilbourne was charged and arrested, a sitting Kentucky state trooper in handcuffs, booked on felony charges, because of what he did to a black man in the woods after a car chase. That moment, Kilbourne's arrest, is something that simply does not happen as often as it should. Police officers are charged with crimes at a fraction of the rate that civilians are, even when the evidence is clear, even when the footage exists. The machinery that is supposed to protect communities from excessive force has historically protected officers from accountability instead. Kilbourne's arrest was not nothing. It was the system doing something it too rarely does, treating a law enforcement officer like a person subject to the same laws he swore to uphold. With a felony indictment now hanging over him, Kilbourne could no longer serve as a road trooper. The law was clear on that. And so, he remained in administrative limbo assigned to the Office of Technical Services, stripped of his powers, waiting for the courts to decide his fate. That waiting stretched on. Months passed. 2023 gave way to 2024. The criminal case worked its way through the Kentucky court system at the pace these things move slowly, deliberately, with continuances and hearings and motions filed and argued. All while Robert Kidd, the man whose teeth were broken and whose lip needed 7 stitches, waited too. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, the calendar turned again. 2024 became 2025, and 2025 became 2026. In January of 2026, 2.5 years after that Thursday morning in Carroll County, Hayden Kilbourne stood before a court and entered a sede plea, guilty, not guilty. Not a trial where a jury had to be convinced. Not a hung jury or a mistrial or an acquittal on technicalities. Kilbourne looked at the evidence against him, at the body camera footage that captured every baton strike, at the charges laid before him, and he pleaded guilty. Guilty to assault in the 2nd degree. Guilty to terroristic threatening in the 3rd degree. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He agreed as a condition of the plea not to seek probation. He would serve his time. He surrendered his law enforcement credentials permanently. Everything that came with the badge, the authority, the identity, the career he had built, gone. And on January 13th, 2026, Hayden Kilbourne submitted his resignation from the Kentucky State Police. He has not been employed by the agency since. Now let's talk about Robert Kidd, because his story didn't end in those Carroll County woods either. Kidd was prosecuted too. Whatever happened to him at the hands of Trooper Kilbourne, Robert Kidd did steal a vehicle. He did lead police on a dangerous pursuit across 4 counties. He did flee on foot when the car was stopped. None of that disappears because of what Kilbourne did to him. And the courts treated it accordingly. Robert Kidd was sentenced to 3 years in prison for the stolen vehicle and the chase. 3 years. Hayden Kilbourne was sentenced to 5 years. The cop got more time than the suspect. The man who stole a car and ran from police received a 3-year sentence. The man who wore a badge and a uniform and swore an oath to protect and serve, and then beat a compliant black man on the ground with a baton, received 5 years. In a landscape where police accountability is rare, where officers who kill unarmed black men walk free, where body camera footage sometimes seems to change nothing, Hayden Kilbourne received a longer prison sentence than the man he victimized. Robert Kidd is expected to be released from custody later this year. He will walk out of that facility carrying everything that was done to him, the physical scars, the broken teeth, whatever that experience left behind in his body and his mind. And Hayden Kilbourne will be in prison. That is accountability. Imperfect, delayed, but real. But the story is still not over. Because Robert Kidd has filed a civil lawsuit against Hayden Kilbourne, and this matters in ways that go beyond the criminal case. The criminal prosecution addressed what Kilbourne did as a violation of the law. The guilty plea, the 5-year sentence, the surrender of credentials, all of that is the state of Kentucky saying this man broke the law and must answer for it. The civil lawsuit is something different. The civil lawsuit is Robert Kidd saying, what about me? What about what was taken from me? What about the pain, the injuries, everything I went through? What is that worth? What does justice look like not just for the state of Kentucky, but for the human being whose face was broken and whose body was bruised in those Carroll County woods? The lawsuit claims that Kidd posed no threat at the time of the beating, that there was absolutely no justification, none, for the force that Kilbourne used against him. That what happened to Robert Kidd was not a split-second mistake in a dangerous situation. It was an assault. Plain and simple. That case is still working its way through the courts. We do not yet know how it will be resolved, but it is there. Robert Kidd is pursuing every avenue available to him. We will be watching. On March 19th, 2026, the Kentucky State Police released this body camera footage publicly. They didn't have to do that. There is no law that required them to put this footage out for the world to see. They chose to. Commissioner Burnett stood before a camera and made a statement. He said that former Trooper Kilbourne's actions were out of line and rightfully prosecuted. He said that troopers have a duty to uphold the law in all ways. And KSP Sergeant Matt Sudduth, the public affairs commander, said in his own statement that this trooper violated the sacred duty of policing. The sacred duty of policing. Those words came from inside the Kentucky State Police. From the people who wear the same uniform Kilbourne wore. From the agency that trained him, hired him, and ultimately had to reckon with what he did. That acknowledgement matters. It doesn't undo the broken teeth or the 7 stitches. It doesn't give Robert Kidd back the morning of July 28th, 2023. But it matters. Because so often, that acknowledgement never comes. Here is what I need you to carry with you when you leave this video. Robert Kidd is a black man. He was on the ground. He was tased. He was showing his hands. He was complying. And he was beaten with a baton anyway. We know this not because of an accusation, not because of a protest, not because of a civil rights attorney holding a press conference. We know this because the camera was rolling, and the camera does not lie. And here is the harder question underneath all of it. This case ended in accountability because the camera existed, because the footage was clear, because KSP chose to investigate rather than bury it, because a prosecutor had the courage to file charges, because Kilbourne ultimately pleaded guilty. Every single one of those things had to go right for justice to happen here. But how many times do none of those things go right? How many times is there no camera, or the footage is never released, or the investigation goes nowhere, or the prosecutor declines to file, or the officer walks free? How many Robert Kidds are there who never got a guilty plea, who never saw the man who beat them sentenced to 5 years, who are out here right now with broken teeth and bruised bodies and no accountability to show for it? That is the question this case forces us to ask. Not just about Carroll County, not just about the Kentucky State Police, but about every badge and every baton and every road in this country where a black man can end up on the ground showing his hands and still not be safe. The camera was there this time. It is not always there, and that should keep all of us up at night. I will see you in the next one.